Hello and welcome back to Nolan Financial Radio. My name is Tara Nolan from Nolan Financial Partners. And if you're new to the show, welcome. And we just want to tell you, during the show, we talk about a lot of different things. And if you have a question or you want to go more in depth about something we talked about, please feel free to give Chris and I a call at 719-210-4242. Definitely visit us online at www.nolanfinancialpartners.com. While you're there, you can click on the radio page and you can check out past shows. We do lots of educational topics. We go from IRAs to 401ks to Medicare to Social Security. We're kind of all over the map because there's so many things involved in financial success. So there's going to be a show for you there. And when you're there, also, please don't hesitate to reach out to Chris and I and set up a face-to-face meeting or book a virtual meeting. You can just book the discovery call. It's a great way to sit down. Chris and I believe in full transparency and talking to you about the process and empowering you to be able to make great decisions. So I'm really excited about today's show. We're going to talk about fall and how it's time to hit the road again. So, here in Colorado, you never know if it's summer or winter or fall on any given day. But I think we're starting to approach that time of the year, at least on the calendar, where fall is arriving. So, football season's arrived and kids have gone back to school. So we're going to talk about some of the cool things that retirees get to do, right? Because they don't have to worry about the kids in school and they don't have to worry about their jobs. So we're going to have a lot of fun with today's show. But before we get started on that, let me check in with my amazing co-host, Tony Shore. Tony, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great, Tara. Thanks for having me on the show. So much fun. And I've just had a crazy busy week this week. I don't know what it is, but I just no time. You ever have weeks where it seems like you just need a lot more time?
Oh, yeah, always, especially to do fun things.
Well, yeah, I haven't been doing fun things. I've been working. So, work, family stuff. So, it's been keeping me busy. But I do love this time of year, Tara. It's my favorite time of year, fall. And I was going to say I love the crisp fall air, when it finally starts to cool down a little bit. But then you reminded me, it cooled down to 45. That's a little... That's kind of a sudden drastic drop. Those aren't always too fun, are they?
Right. No, not exactly. But, it happens.
Yeah.
But I hear you. I've been busy with this week, but what I've started to finally do again is I got on and I've ridden Ava a couple times this week. I don't know if the listeners know, but I've been competing in dressage with Donzer for like almost 18 years now and just have had to officially retire him because of his arthritis. Oh. And it's been a little bit of a grieving process for me because he's been my partner for so long. And so I've just started to go, you know what? Ava is still healthy and she's good to go. And Tony, I think she likes being picked. She's like, I'm it. I'm the main horse now.
Oh, wow.
And Donzer is actually very happy. He comes up every day after I'm done riding Ava and sticks his head out and says, where's my treat? So he's like, I think he's totally fine skipping the whole work part and just showing up for the treats at the end.
Wow, so, that's funny.
He understands retirement. He gets it.
That's good. That's good. Well, it all worked out then, right?
It is working out, but it's always interesting. Like you don't realize the partnerships that you have, and things change. Life keeps moving on.
Yes, that's the thing about life. It does keep moving. But what are we talking about today? We're talking about about fall, and it might be time to take a trip, especially for retirees. I think it's a timely show. So a lot of people, the leaves changing, people want to take trips, right?
Well, and it's perfect. So what we're going to do, Tony, today is we're going to kind of divide the show up into travel categories, and we're going to get things rolling by looking at Europe. And this is particularly timely because for the listeners out there, if you don't know, I moved on from my command job in the Air Force Reserve. I'm going to be a mobilization assistant at USAFE, which is in Ramstein, Germany.
Oh,
and so wow. I actually spent yesterday going through the process. I'm going to take my first trip out there in October. And
wow.
I've never really spent any time in Germany. I have flown through Germany many times, with the 130 traveling back and forth to the desert. So Chris and I have been busy looking at, flights and hotels and COVID restrictions. And so we're in the middle of planning our own European vacation today. So It's pretty interesting. And it's for today's call, it's a very popular location for a lot of retirees because The summer tourist season is past, and so it's generally a little less busy. And what I just wanted to touch base on first, Tony, was just to talk about, some of the COVID-19 rules that I'm encountering as I'm going through the process.
Yeah. Well, I hope while you're in Germany, by the way, is Chris going with you?
He is going to go with me because
That's
we thought
awesome.
about it and we're like, you know what? He can take 2 weeks, he can bring the laptop, he can do back office work,
Sure.
while I'm working, but absolutely
Yeah.
he should come.
Well, and you guys are going to hopefully you'll have a little bit of downtime while you're there between working to enjoy the trip and see some sights or something like that, right?
That's hopefully the plan. I mean, we'll definitely have a weekend in there, and then
Sure.
yeah. And then the thing is, it's always interesting. I forget, in Europe, things are so much closer than they are here in the States.
Yeah, I mean, you're like, I'm in Germany, but hey, I want to visit Switzerland, or you know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
one of the other European countries. So, and it's closer. It's like driving from, it's like driving from Colorado to Washington. It's like, it's not terrible. It's just driving to another state. So, tell me, Tara, about these COVID rules. Some of the things you've had to deal with, or what you've noticed.
Well, I think what I noticed is COVID, I think we're starting to realize, I think it's going to be with us for a while now. And so
I think so. I'm afraid so.
yeah, and I think one of the things is that you can go to the Centers for Disease Control and they have guidelines, but they're fluid, right? And the
Right.
problem is we don't know exactly how COVID is working. It almost seems like it may have a cycle like the flu season, maybe, or something like that. So, but like here's an example: is in late July, the CDC considered Iceland to be very low risk, but
Wow.
then by mid-August, Iceland was moved to the highest risk category, which means that travel isn't recommended. So, the CDC is going to put out guidance as real time. So that's what makes it hard for us planners out there, right? Because we like to make our plan.
Right.
We
Well,
like
you
to have
want to plan
everything
ahead.
locked in.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we just have to realize is that when you're traveling, especially overseas, you're just going to need to really find that website or the page where you can stay up to date on what the guidelines are. So that way, as you're traveling, what the rules are going to be. It does seem like traveling around the world, it's a little easier if you have your vaccine. So you just have to see where you fall in that situation. But that's one of the things that a lot of the countries are looking for. But I think it doesn't have to be a barrier. And especially if you're retired, one of the luxuries you have is you finally have a little more time. Like you're not locked into that 2-week summer vacation or the Christmas break. You have a little more flexibility.
Sure. And I mean, because that is not great news for those who are planning on traveling to Europe this fall or this winter. It just because plans could change at any time. Like you said, flexibility, right? I mean, people should be flexible.
You absolutely got to be flexible. And it's kind of we just had a big planning the last couple of days, Tony, is Chris and I also have a timeshare in Hawaii. And we have to use our points. And so we got on the Hilton website and we're checking it out. And they've got the rules about, they've had a lot of flexibility, but they're stopping that starting October 1st. And October 1st, your plans are your plans and there's no refunds. And so we had to take a minute and go, well, how lucky do we feel? Are we confident that we're going to be able to go?
Yeah.
And I think we just have to trust that, if situations get dire again, I think flexibility will probably come back. But it is part of that process to look. And there was, like, on the website, they even had built in like a $69 cancellation fee. Like, do you want to pay $69 to protect yourself in case you need to cancel? So I think this is just going to become part of the travel process.
Yeah, it is.
You've always kind of looked at it, right? Because you never plan a trip planning to cancel. But I think we're just going to get a little more aware about when you're traveling. What are the policies for the airlines if I need to change my plane tickets? What about the hotels? How long or how soon do I have to cancel a hotel trip? So that's just going to become, I think, a little bit more part of the planning process.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to note, Tara, if you're planning on traveling to multiple countries, you've got to prepare for the rules and regulations changing from country to country. And like you mentioned earlier, the situation with COVID changing from country to country. Like Iceland was one of the greatest places. Oh, they've got no COVID there. Now they're saying don't travel to Iceland because of COVID restrictions and COVID outbreaks. So, or they're not allowing people in because they don't want COVID. So you have to check and see what each country is doing. And so it does make country to country travel a bit difficult right now.
And I like that you brought that up, Tony, because I think as Americans, we're very spoiled because we live in
We
such a
are.
large, I mean, every state could be a country if we were in Europe.
Yeah,
And so we
true.
get very spoiled that you can kind of just travel anywhere you can get your car and drive. You're probably going to be okay. My experience over the last 2 years has been like traveling to Hawaii. They can have more restrictions because it is an island. But
Sure.
when you go travel to Europe, you just have to get out of that mindset, which is part of why it's fun to go to Europe, because you can go from country to country to country in a day or two easily.
Right. Yeah.
But you have to remember. So I have the story, Tony. The first time Chris and I went to Rome, we went to Vatican City. And
wow.
so we stopped to get a sandwich, and we were there, and it was, busy, crowded afternoon, and we got our sandwich, and we were just looking for like a space on the sidewalk to sit and have our sandwich. Yep. It was just like packed wall to wall people. So we kind of went and found this spot, and very quickly we were shown out and said, no, this is the Vatican. This is its own country. And we were like, but we just want to have our sandwich. And I was like, oh gosh, am I being the elderly American right now? Going, just leave me alone. I want to have my lunch. And they're like, this is our country. So one of those lessons I'm a little chagrined about, but got to learn.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And that's, for us, it's like, we don't realize, oh, you're right. You're in Rome. But if you step over that line, you're in Vatican City, which is its own country. So that's interesting. That's fascinating. It's a funny story, but yeah, a little embarrassing, but you didn't know. So yeah, but what else do you have? I mean, what else do we need to know if we're traveling right now?
Well, it's always been available, but something that you might want to look at is travel insurance. And it's designed to cushion you against that canceled trip, or to help you. And I've done this, Tony, like especially when I've traveled to China, and Chris, when he traveled to Argentina, you can get, it's about $100 usually to cover unexpected medical expenses on a trip. And especially if you're traveling like very far out of your comfort zone, it's not that much money, but it gives you that peace of mind, especially with medical things, because you know how medical works in our country, but it's harder when you're in a different country and you don't know maybe what all the signs look like and what things are going to be. So you can just make part of that your process when you're looking at, what are the cancellation processes. Go ahead and just see what insurance is available. Obviously, check it out and make sure it's going to cover things that you want covered. But it can give you that peace of mind, and sometimes that's worth it, right?
Right. Yeah, that's true. And I think that's the peace of mind is what we're all looking for. And especially when it comes to traveling again, and you mentioned, you're a planner. People need to plan ahead if they're going to travel, especially now. But I think traveling can be done still, and it can be fun. And travel insurance is important. Obviously, that's a big thing that a lot of people, like you mentioned, the $69 fee right now. The travel insurance and these, pre-cancellation fees, you can pay this amount, then you can cancel at any time. I think it's probably worth spending the extra money, wouldn't you say?
It's always the thing with insurance, right? Is it's worth it if you need it. And then if it turns out you didn't need it, then you're like, man, I shouldn't have bought that.
Right. It's true.
That hindsight thing. I mean, we all feel that way.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, but that's just a decision. What I just like people listening when they're making their plans is just to be aware that it's available, because then you can make your call. But what's very frustrating, I find, is if there was a tool available that I didn't know about and that I didn't even have a chance to make a decision. And that's what I want people to have options.
Yeah. People do have options, but back to planning really quick before we move on. Let's take a moment to let the listeners know how they can get a hold of you, set up that complimentary consultation. I think it's important because you're offering, there's no charge, there's no obligation, and they can sit down with you or Chris or talk to you. You can do a web meeting, you can do it in person, and really lay out a plan for their finances and see if they're able to take that trip, right?
Absolutely, Tony. So I'll just let everybody know that number is 719-210-4242. It's 719-210-4242. And Tony, for the people listening today, definitely call in if you're especially a pre-retiree or just newly retired, because one of the things that Chris and I really like to do is look at your plan and make sure we build in some fun. Because I think a lot of people, you spend so much time in that growing, I call it the get it phase of life, where you're accumulating, you're building that nest egg, and then they get to retirement and they're like, well, I don't want to run out of money, so I'm not sure if I can do anything. And so that's like one of the things I think should be part of a good holistic financial plan, Tony, is planning for your fun too. So Tony, that number is 719-210-4242, 719-210-4242. For the people that want to look at their holistic plan and say, I've done all the hard work creating this nest egg, how do I build in fun and not have to worry about running out of money?
Right. Right. And for our radio listeners, if they aren't able to write down that number right now, they can also contact you via your website. Give that website address once again.
Sure, Tony. It's www.nolanfinancialpartners.com.
All right. NolanFinancialPartners.com. Great website, lots of resources, and you can set up that complimentary consultation right there on the website. Or I know that you and Chris just love to hear from people if they want to talk about what topics they want to hear on the show. I think that's fantastic as well. So let's jump into our next segment here. You've been talking to us about traveling right now, maybe doing some fall traveling for retirees out there, or anyone really. And you've been focused on Europe. I know that you said you wanted to do it in stages, maybe a little closer to home now.
Well, a little closer to home. And Tony, of course, something that's near and dear to my heart are 8 beach towns. Perfect for fall getaways.
Beach vacations. I love it.
And I have to confess, Tony, I have started going back and rewatching Hawaii Five-0 just for the scenes from Hawaii.
It is. It's great. Hawaii Five-0, Magnum PI, even the new Hawaii Five-0. I love those shows because of all the scenes of Hawaii. It's so beautiful.
Sometimes I even fast forward through all the shoot 'em up parts just to get to the next scene of the beach.
Book 'em, Dano. All right. That's funny.
But it's a great thing. And I can remember as a kid that this is one of the things my grandparents used to do is they would try to take a beach trip for all the kids in the summer during our summer break. But I remember my grandparents, they always took a special trip to the shore up in Jersey, just themselves, when we were all back in school. And I was so jealous. And we always got the saltwater taffy.
Yep.
And that's what they always sent us from the beach. But they loved it. And they're like, you guys had your vacation summer. Now we're going to have our trip. Yeah. And here's like a great place that I came across was Newport Beach in California. And it's just like an hour from the Los Angeles International Airport. And it has 8 miles of beach. So Tony, you can bike, you can walk on the boardwalk, you can take a harbor cruise, you can hitch a ride on the Balboa Fun Zone Ferris wheel. I always like getting up high on things. And of course, there's also lots of great restaurants.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
You know what? It's funny you bring up Newport Beach there because I used to work there for 5.5 years. I did radio promotions and worked in Newport Beach and lived in Costa Mesa, right on the edge of Newport Beach, just 2 miles up from on Newport Boulevard, just 2 miles away from the ocean. You could feel the ocean breeze up where I lived, and it was so great. And the beaches there are great. Now, I haven't been back in years, but sure, it's packed, but the roads, the interstates, and the big city is packed, but the beaches are still very nice. And Seal Beach is a great place. They have a nice pier and a restaurant at the end of the pier. And there's so many little towns from Laguna Beach all the way up to Santa Barbara. That's a good one. And in the fall, that's a great place to go if you still want a warm climate destination, because this time of year, it's still beautiful there.
That's perfect. And then we're going to move on, Tony, to Harbor Springs, Michigan. And I have to admit my bias, right? Because I always forget about the Great Lakes and all the water that's up there. Yeah. And it's also like a beach vacation, and it's a little further north, so you can get a ticket to see all the fall foliage, which is, I really miss that in Colorado, right? We just don't have that many deciduous trees. Like I miss the maple trees, all the reds and oranges.
Yeah,
But
that's a big thing. Tourists come from all over to northern Minnesota and northern Michigan to see the fall colors, and the fall foliage is just it's so beautiful.
and I don't know, it still reminds me, Tony, I still can remember like going back to school as a kid. That's still like a happy association because you start looking at, your sweaters and your flannel pants and getting ready to go back to school. And it was kind of just like about another new beginning. And, not that school was always that much fun, but that new beginning of going and seeing your friends again and doing new things. And so like Michigan it's kind of has that feel to it because you can see the fall foliage, have that little bit of crisp, cool air. They have art galleries and antique stores. There's plenty of hotels, but also lots of B&Bs. So a B&B
Yeah,
is nice for a weekend getaway. It's something
yeah.
different. You get to meet some local people. And here's a really cool thing, Tony, is they have what they call a tunnel of trees.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's a 20-mile long State Highway 119. And it takes you under these towering trees and then out onto these bluffs that loom down on Lake Michigan. And so
Wow.
just reading about it, Tony, I think I'm going to have to add it to my list as a trip that I want to take because how
Yeah.
cool is that to just be surrounded by a tunnel of trees?
Especially with all the oranges and reds and beautiful fall leaves. You want to hit it. And there's, I think, like a week or two period where you can get those fall colors. So you have to plan again ahead. But that's beautiful. The tunnel of trees. I imagine that would be spectacular. I think that sounds pretty great to me.
That's exciting. And then coming back to the beach again, there is, obviously in Florida, they have Panama Beach is another
Oh,
great
yeah.
option.
Panama City.
If you're looking for that warmer destination, this area is famous for its pristine water, the ample swimming and snorkeling. And, when I was taking Donzer down before I had to retire him, we were going down to the Gulf Coast in Venice. And Tony, I just talked to some friends that are still down there. And, that part of Florida is just beautiful.
It is.
It's the crystal clear waters. And, especially if you go to some of the little smaller towns, I think it's a little safer than the big beach scenes. And if you're
Yep.
retired, you're probably not looking for that right now.
Right. Right.
So, and that's kind of what this thought on this segment is there's a lot of beaches, there's a lot of coastline, and maybe pick up a map and just do a little research and go, wonder what's right there.
Yeah.
Because we all know the big famous ones, but pick some little places, and I'm always pleasantly surprised. There's always usually like a good coffee shop and a nice little restaurant.
Yeah. It's
And you
fun
get
to
to walk
find those
along a
things.
beach.
Yeah, and it's fun to find that, oh man, this is a great little place. I love doing that. And sometimes I love being spontaneous, like let's just check out this little town, like they have a main street, or do some reading. Oh yeah, let's check that out. So yeah, it's kind of fun. And nowadays with the internet, it makes it easier to find some of these little great restaurants and things like that. And I enjoy checking out the leaves, but you're talking about heading south for a fall beach trip that still includes the drinks with the little umbrellas, sitting on the beach. That sounds pretty good to me.
It really does, Tony. And I can just tell
Yeah.
you that it's making me think about, for the people listening in, definitely give Chris and I a call if you're interested in looking at your financial plan to make sure that it allows for travel.
Sure.
And you're getting a flavor, because I find that Chris and I sometimes will dovetail into these conversations about, so now that we're looking at your plan and we've created this, where are you going to go?
Yeah.
And we
That's
like
the fun part.
we like to talk about that. So Tony, for folks that are listening that want to make sure that they have included fun as part of their holistic financial plan, that number is 719-210-4242. And Tony, it's really fun. I love sitting down with our clients when we've created this space where they go, I can have fun in retirement. And so Tony, that number is 719-210-4242 for folks that want to look at that holistic plan and say, okay, I've covered down on my medical situation, I've got my income situation, and what do I do for fun? How do I make sure that that's included?
There you go. And normally you're very focused on the show, a lot on the financial aspect and financial planning and the ins and outs of different things, like IRAs, 401ks, things like that, investments. But it's great because now we're talking about what you can do if you have a good financial plan in place. So what's another destination or location you have to recommend for a fall trip?
Well, Tony, another one of my favorites is DC, back towards the East Coast.
I
And
love DC.
DC gives you so much flexibility because it's just that right time of year, because it's a walking city. And
Yeah.
you can, if you're anywhere around the mall, I can just spend easily a whole day or two just walking, looking at the Smithsonian and looking at all the monuments.
Yep.
And it's the perfect time of year because you don't want to be there in the middle of summer. And the
No.
thing is Washington also has, the metro, so you can actually get out of the city pretty easily as well. And you're not that far away from the beach. So you can do day trips to different beaches. And then just the list of historical sites that are all around. I think DC this is the time of year you want to go because you just don't want to be there when it's hot and muggy and you're retired. So the kids are all back in school. So it's almost like you get to play in the city on your own.
Yeah, that's true. And DC just the Smithsonian's alone. And there are many of them. And now they're at different locations too. Some are out, you can take a train, the Air and Space Museum, and they've added some museums. There's one about there's like a news and media museum to see the history of that in our country.
Mm-hmm.
It's just amazing. And it's so amazing. I love DC. And the great news is like my brother and sister-in-law live in Reston, Virginia. Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And just to take the train from DC into Virginia, where there's tons of things to see. It's just there's so many trips around there that you could do. There's so much to do there. I mean, you could spend 2 weeks and still not cover everything in every Smithsonian museum because there are a number of them.
So, so Tony, I think we've hit like every coast. So now we need to go down to Texas, right?
So Texas. Okay.
We've been east, west, north. Now it goes south. So South Padre Island in Texas can be perfect.
Oh, wow.
It's a big spring break destination, but once everyone's back in school, it kind of falls back to that more leisurely pace, like all of these beach towns do, right?
Yeah.
And it's just, it's the beach. So you've got the beautiful beaches to walk on, the wildlife, just the amazing views. And, South Padre Island has a birding nature center and an alligator sanctuary. So it's got,
wow, that's
for that
cool.
kind of interest. There's actually a dolphin research and sea life nature center. So they have boat trips. And so there's just a lot of things to do. So it's almost like start driving towards one end of the country and you'll hit something cool.
Yeah, it's true. Our country has so much to offer. If the rules and regulations of Europe are too daunting for you, or maybe you don't have that money budgeted in your plans, just the U.S. is full of great things. Like, I feel like I've been fortunate to see a lot in our country and go a lot of places, but I've only been to Texas a couple of times, and it was just to Austin for a convention. So South Padre Island, I had forgotten. Obviously the name rings a bell, but I didn't know anything about it. And I mean, it seems like a great destination. I mean, if you're traveling with your grandkids, I think how excited those kids would be to see an alligator or jump in a boat and go see some dolphins. I mean, that's pretty cool.
That's awesome, Tony. And then, we've talked about Hawaii, and then there's also Alaska. And what's really cool is there's these wildlife refuges. Like, we're all pretty familiar with the national parks, but in America, we also have a lot of national wildlife refuges in Alaska, which can be far, but also in Washington State, where the Puget Sound is. There's a lot of wetlands, riverbanks, tidal flats, lush forest. There's Mount Rainier National Park that's really close. So there's also, you can, if you like, wildlife and nature, there's the whole wildlife refuge area as a thought for planning trips.
Yeah, so, that's really cool.
Tony, how could you ever get bored in retirement? Because there's just so much to get out there and see.
Yeah, those Alaska trips, Alaska cruises, wildlife refuge. There's so many of them that are beautiful, and I've been to a couple. They're great. But you know what? We're out of time. I can't believe it. It flew by. Is there anything else you want to add before we go today, Tara?
Tony, just to hit the takeaway from today's show. Today's show is all about we plan for retirement so that we can enjoy it. So you work hard all your life and you save and you budget. And you need to make sure that as part of your plan, you include your fun. And I think a lot of people forget about this because we're all so used to being responsible. We've raised our families, we've gotten our kids off to college, and we've saved this nest egg and we're making sure we don't run out of money. And we forget to plan for fun. And so that is the big takeaway from today's show, Tony, is if anyone listening to today's show hasn't planned for their fun, please give Chris and I a call, 719-210-4242, so we can sit down and look at your plan and make sure that you've also planned for fun.
All right. Well, great show today, Tara. And listeners, that does it for today's episode of Nolan Financial Radio with our host, Tara Nolan.
Join us again soon for another episode of Nolan Financial Radio. Take care, and we'll talk with you next time.